Hello, I'm Lindsay Konzak, editor of Modern Distribution Management at MDM.com. Welcome to this month's episode of Executive Briefing. This month, Angela Polson speaks with Jay Greyson of Supply Chain Equity Partners about why distributors need to consider M&A in their strategic plans. With a background in both private equity and investment banking, Jay provides a well-rounded perspective on how distributors should view M&A and common mistakes made and best practices in the M&A process. Next, Janelle Stelton-Holtmeyer speaks with Charlie Hale, president of FCX Performance, a flow products control distributor based in Columbus, Ohio. Charlie talks about his company's approach to M&A, the importance of a strong management team at acquisition targets, and the importance of hiring smart and ensuring the next generation is prepared for a career in distribution. Enjoy.
I'm Angela Polson, staff writer with Modern Distribution Management, reporting to you from the Advanced Profit Improvement Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. Today, I'm speaking with Jay Greyson, principal for Supply Chain Equity Partners and a speaker at this week's conference. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Angela.
So before we jump into questions, just tell me a little bit about Supply Chain Equity Partners and what you do there.
Be happy to. Supply Chain Equity is the only private equity firm in North America dedicated exclusively to investing in wholesale distributors and logistics companies. It's been our focus for decades as individual partners or principals, and we still remain the only exclusive distribution-focused PE firm in the country. A couple of things that make us different from any other PE firm, in addition to that exclusive focus in distribution. One, we do not have any institutional capital. So we don't have any of the pressures that some of those institutions can put on other private equity firms in terms of when to put money to work and when to exit transactions. So we're in this more for the long term, Angela. The other thing that makes us very unique is almost all of those investors are former executives, owners, CEOs, CFOs of distribution companies. Former executives in industries ranging from healthcare to consumer products to industrial MRO from a market perspective, with business models ranging from branch-based kind of brick and mortar businesses on one side to direct marketing companies, be they internet businesses or catalogers on the other side, and mixed models in between. So it's all different types of industries, different models, and all throughout North America. So again, what we do is we look to partner with top management teams and try to work together with them and find ways to accelerate growth of the business and help improve the value of the business.
Great. Could you provide an update on the current M&A market and just kind of project a forecast for the kind of conditions that we can expect going into 2013?
Sure. Maybe the best thing to do is start with 2012 because, as I think a lot of people saw, and it was expected, there was a significant pull forward from 13 into 12 of a lot of transactions just in M&A in general, and that was done largely to beat the tax man. We all knew that on the table was a very significant increase in capital gains rates, some additional healthcare surcharges that went on top of it, a lot of money to owners that they can get a transaction done in 12 versus 13. So a significant pull through there. In distribution, what was interesting is we now look at the first 2 months of 2013 compared to the first 2 months of 2012. There were actually more transactions in 13 than 12. So we in our internal proprietary database tracked 39 distribution transactions in the first 2 months, actually through February 24th of 2013, 39 versus 34 in the same period in 2012. So we do see that there has been an acceleration, a little bit what's going on there. Fewer platform deals though, Angela. So if we look at the deals that were done while they were larger in quantity, there were fewer platform deals. By that I mean the larger companies upon which you can make add-on acquisitions. So all in all, I think it was a healthy 2012, and we go into a healthy 2013. Now, there's some dynamics in there I think that are interesting to our readership. I mean, if you look first of all at private equity, private equity still has somewhere over $400 billion of uninvested capital. And when you add that to some of the leverage that they will put on it from a bank, you get about $1 trillion worth of buying power. So there's a lot of capital yet to be deployed through private equity, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the pressures on private equity in general, because some of the firms that only have 5 or 6 years in which to invest, remember we lost as an industry almost 2 years, 2008 and 2009, when Lehman blew up and the whole financial crisis hit. So there are a bunch of firms that are behind in their investing schedule, but really $1 trillion of purchasing power sitting out there waiting to be deployed. And private equity still remains interested in distribution, and even more so than back in, say, 2006, 2007, where 6, 7, 8, 25 to 30% of all distribution transactions were private equity based. Last year, 2012, the number was 42%. So again, private equity is becoming an even more and more important part of distribution transactions. So you have that dynamic going on there. And now you add to that the strategics that are out there, because strategics have well over $1 trillion just of cash on their balance sheet. And if you look in the last few years, they've actually been delevering as well. So a little bit less debt, more cash. What does it mean? They now, in the last year to 2 years, have become increasingly aggressive in terms of making acquisitions. And that in fact impacts everybody here at the APIC conference one way or another. And we'll spend a lot of time tomorrow talking about dynamic, because the competitive environment for a distributor can change overnight if one of those big distributors comes in with their healthy balance sheet. And they're under a lot of pressure, Angela, to go ahead and make acquisitions. Because they spent, if you look the last 3-4 years after Lehman blew up, first they spent a lot of time just helping their balance sheet and firming up their balance sheet. Then they started to look at how do they just kind of improve profits with the business. They had a good strong increase in revenue as the economy bounced back. Now it's a little tougher to gain revenue organically, and to support some of the prices and multiples we see in the market, they're now out there pretty aggressively buying their growth. So I think that leads into a 2013 that should be very good for M&A in general and for distribution specific.
So the title of your talk tomorrow is "You Are a Buyer or a Seller." So why do you see M&A as such a viable way to create value for most distributors?
Well, we see it as a way to create value, and also it's becoming, we think, more and more an imperative. And it gets down to what's happening in terms of the consolidation of the industry and how aggressive these strategics are really kind of being out there. We talked last year, actually, at the same conference, about hiding under your balance sheet. Well, a lot of distributors were very happy, and rightly so. They survived 2008, survived 2009. And now we're saying, okay, now I want to improve my balance sheet, maybe take out a dividend, make some small investments in the business. I want to keep on growing. What's really changed in this environment in the last 18 months, maybe 24 months, is the level of acquisitions. And I just quoted a couple of numbers from just 2 months in the year, but the level of acquisitions continues to increase in distribution. So what does that mean for your readership and your viewership? The competitive environment can literally change overnight. So you could be sitting as a distributor of product and services X and have a pretty good understanding of your competitive environment and your served geography, your served market. But now we have to really step back and think about what happens if one of the big consolidators, and those consolidators can be strategics or we call quasi-strategics, which are private equity-backed platforms that are making acquisitions, come in and buy a competitor that maybe heretofore was very weak in your area. And now all of a sudden, that company is part of a much larger entity that has much stronger IT, better opportunities for your people in terms of growth, better ability to serve customers on a nationwide or regional or super regional basis with key account type programs. They have a much stronger vendor importance. They have stronger rebates, so their cost position is better. They're more efficient in operations, on and on and on. So that literally can change overnight. So one of the things that we're talking about here again at the APIC conference is how do you prepare for it? And the message that we believe very strongly in is, as a distributor, it's no longer just nice to be making acquisitions or can add value to make acquisitions. We really see, as consolidation increases over the next handful of years, that you need to be a buyer and to become bigger and stronger yourself, or maybe consider being part of a larger enterprise going forward in some form or fashion. It's just not as safe to be sitting as kind of a small to mid-sized distributor anymore.
Talk a little bit more, if you would, about why it's important for a distributor to link M&A to their strategy, and also would that be the case even if a distributor doesn't have immediate plans to sell?
Interesting. A lot of distributors we talk to will ask us about acquisitions or specific acquisitions. And the first thing we always try to take it back to, Angela, is what is your strategic plan? What's your strategic roadmap? Where are you trying to take your business? Because acquisitions for acquisition's sake alone, and just to grow to some scale and revenue, the entire APIC conference here, folks, is all about profit. You hear Randy McLean and all the other speakers here talking about revenue doesn't matter. Revenue is for ego. Profitability and cash flow is really reality. So how do we get focused and stay focused on the profitability and the key part of this? So acquisitions for acquisition's sake just don't make sense anymore. Some of your readership may remember Tyco back in the 90s buying anything and everything, until they just kind of blew up. So we always go back and say, what's your strategic plan? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to expand geographically for certain reasons? Maybe you want to cover key accounts better. Or you want to be more market or industry specific to have better solutions for that specific industry. Maybe you're just trying to grow to some extent in a region to offer better opportunities for your people vis-a-vis your competition. So what are you trying to accomplish? And always sit back and say, can I accomplish this best organically, investing myself and building it? That takes time and resources. And sometimes it's not just the resources and the cost of the resources, it's the time it takes to get there. If it's an imperative, for example, in some distribution businesses, Angela, in some models, it's becoming more and more important to have a strong e-commerce capability. Well, if it takes 2 years to develop that internally, and you have the opportunity to make an acquisition in or around your space of a firm that has an extremely strong e-commerce platform, and you can then have the synergies in combining with that business, maybe you want to use that for an acquisition. So again, it depends on what are you trying to accomplish, then determine whether you want to build it organically or you want to build it through acquisition.
So for the distributor that does decide that they want to sell, what are some of the general steps in the process, and kind of what does the general process look like?
Oh, that's a good question. We get asked that a lot, and I wish there was a little playbook or a piece of paper, for example, with the questions on it. We spent almost 2 decades building a process to make acquisitions. The due diligence phase is typically somewhere between 60, 75 days on the short end. It can go up to 4 months or so, depending on the nature of what we're trying to do. But a true deep due diligence dive, which is really important if you're looking to acquire a company, covers literally every facet of the business. So you're digging into customers and stability of customer base and concentration of customer base and reach and frequency and monetary value, some direct marketing stats of that. You're looking at vendors and concentration of vendors. Will they allow an M&A? Will they transfer their franchise, so to speak, to a new buyer? You're looking at the IT systems. You're looking at operations and DC efficiency, and is there an ERP and a WMS, and how does everything work? And all of that, be honest, is secondary to management and key personnel. So the first thing we're talking to the team about, and you should talk to a team about, is what does the management want to do? There are always deeper relationships there between management and customers and vendors and employees than quite often get put on the table to begin with. And there are always going to be a handful of key salespeople, if it's an outside sales model, and quite often even with an inside sales model, that you really need to wrap your hands around and understand. But our playbook literally is over an inch thick. It's been developed over almost 2 decades. And every time we get into a new engagement or work with a new firm, we learn something every single time. So it's not for the faint of heart, and I would encourage your viewership not to take on a large acquisition as a first part-time job. Pretty dangerous, especially with your own bank account.
So when you've seen people selling, what are the common mistakes that distributors make, or do they leave steps out? What are things that distributors should avoid when they're going through this process?
And that gets back somewhat to the question that you just asked before, Angela, because it's kind of a Corey saying, but we really take it to heart and think it's true, and that is, you should not practice medicine without a license. We don't think you should practice M&A without experience. It's usually a large dollar. Unless it's a small tuck-in to your business, it's usually a large dollar. You're putting your own balance sheet at risk in making that acquisition. There are literally tens of different major ways that a deal can fall apart. You can be missing something in due diligence, missing something with key personnel. It could be a current shareholder issue. I mean, again, we've got an inch-thick long playbook we have to go through, and where deals become challenged at times is different every single time we go through that process. So it's make sure you have the expertise in-house. If you don't, go out and partner with somebody or rent the expertise, but do it in some way, because it's a very serious situation when you're looking to make an acquisition. Done right, it can add significant value to the enterprise and to your company. Done wrong, it can have some pretty significant downside implications.
So Let's look at things from the other side of the perspective here. If a distributor is planning on possibly buying another company, what does the process look like from their end? How is it different, and what are the major steps that they would need to take?
Again, it goes back to the playbook. At the risk of being repetitive, it really gets down to one of the things we talked about a moment ago, and that's we do this for a living. We have a playbook, we've developed it over 10, 15 years, and every time we're involved in an acquisition, be it a platform, Angela, or even a small tuck-in acquisition, almost every time we learn something new. So there is as much or more art to acquisitions than there is the checklist and the process and the skill. So if you look at what it takes to make the acquisition on the side, there are just a lot of different places one can go wrong. We've seen distributors that make acquisitions not even engage an accounting firm to do what's called a quality of earnings review, which is really one of the initial steps to make sure that the financials are set. Because many times the financials that are presented in either a review or an audit don't truly represent the full nature of what the business would look like post-transaction, because a lot of owners who are also managers in the business are managing the business somewhat to minimize taxes, which is part of the benefit of owning a business. So we always have to look at what does the business look like post-transaction. And that's just one little piece just in terms of vetting out the financials. But everything we talked about from every step of the business, from customers to vendors and operations and the entire business, you have to dig in deep, really deep into everything, because you never know where you're going to find the gotcha. And our job is always to keep looking until we're clear of gotchas or we find them, and then we talk through with that company what we found and how to best structure and how to work around it. So again, it gets back to, as a doc, don't practice medicine without a license. If you're going to do M&A, you don't have a lot of experience in your firm, please go out and find individuals that can help to do that, or partner with folks like ourselves and grow this business together over the next 5 or 10 years.
So other than the mistake of not going out and getting help, what are some of the common mistakes that you see buyers make?
They go through the whole gamut of what's going on. I think the issue of vendor concentration is quite often overlooked. I think the point of customer concentration is often overlooked. We have seen many instances in which, if you look at a list of customers and the top, say, 3 to 5 customers represent 30 or 40% of the business, maybe the top 1 or 2 customers are 20 or 25, it's easy to, I won't get caught up in, but ascribe more value to the length of that relationship between the firm and that customer than may really be there. So yes, maybe you have done business with that customer for 20 years, but in the changing environment that you and I are talking about here, and in many companies, IT is becoming more important. The things that got you that customer years ago, and even some that have allowed you to retain that customer over the last few years, may be a different set of criteria and attributes that are going to be needed to keep that customer going forward. So we've seen sometimes where vendors pull out post-transaction, customers, not because of the transaction, but a year or 2 later, just naturally have decided maybe this business doesn't give them what they need in terms of being able to serve them and go out. So it's those types of areas that we think are very, very important to look at. And the biggest thing, Angela, I think through it all, for the folks that are putting their own money up and looking to make an acquisition, to your viewership out there, is as you're going through this process, there are always going to be a set of key must-haves. So going into due diligence, we encourage any acquirer to say, what are the 2 to 5 things that we have to make absolutely certain are valid? If we're buying a company because of its e-commerce capabilities, make certain we're bringing in experts and we convince ourselves that that is truly the e-commerce solution that we want to be putting our name behind and having to move forward. And do that with every one of these 2 to 5 or whatever the number is, key areas that absolutely have to come out clean during due diligence. And when you're during due diligence, it's easy to fall in love with a company when you're doing this, because you have your team involved. They are interfacing in latter stages with the team of the company being acquired. You're pulling together these joint teams to talk about how you'll handle customers and handle vendors and handle operations going in. But if at some time you're finding that there is something you didn't expect going in and it's major and it causes you to step back and say, I really need to reconsider this acquisition, key thing is don't be afraid to step away from a table and always remember what you're risking. Because quite often the best deal is the deal that doesn't get done and the deal that you don't do.
Do you have any other advice or best practices that you can offer?
Well, we talked about a lot of things, Angela. I think one of the things I would, again, continue to encourage folks is when you're going through the process, it's easy to fall in love and don't get enamored. So again, find out what those kind of key go or no-go criteria are, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side. Make sure you've got a very strong team to diligence in those areas. Work really hard. If you have to extend the time period doing what you do in due diligence, that's okay. But always remember what's at risk. Because it's not just the investment you're looking to make in that company, but if it's done wrong, it can have a significant impact on the firm that you're having. It can impact the culture. It always does somewhat the culture of your business, and you're the acquirer. It impacts the financials of your business. It can impact how your customers view you, how your vendors view you. So if it's not done right, or you're buying something you didn't really understand or recognize you're buying on the downside, so to speak, it can impact everything you or your family or your ownership has taken decades to build. So be diligent, go through a process, work with folks that have done it before, make sure you know what the key handful of go, no-goes are, do a deep dive there, and if it's just not what you thought it was, it's easy to fall in love, but don't be afraid to step away.
You can learn more about the buying and selling process by emailing Jay at jgrayson@supplychainequity.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Angela. I appreciate it.
And now for 7 Minutes With, which will feature a short interview each month with the leader of a distribution or manufacturing company.
I'm Janelle Stelton-Holtmeyer, Associate Editor of Modern Distribution Management, and today I'm talking with Charlie Hale, President of FCX Performance. FCX is a provider of process flow control solutions based in Columbus, Ohio. Hi, Charlie. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, in general, how's business been?
Good. Business, I think, got soft in the fourth quarter. It slowed down really across most markets and most geographies that we cover. But it's seemed to rebound nicely as we start the first quarter. Bookings are up double-digit growth over last first quarter, and lots of quotation and activity we're seeing in the marketplace today.
Well, that sounds great. What's the outlook for the rest of 2013?
I think we're cautiously optimistic. We're still seeing a lot of activity around projects. It seems to, orders aren't being let as quickly as we would like, but overall I think we see a pretty good start to the year and a much stronger second half.
Are there any areas where you're seeing particular strength or challenges yet?
You know what, I think the oil and gas market, we entered through acquisition in 2010 of Bayrow Controls in Houston. And that market was really solid the past couple of years. Some of the projects slowed a little bit towards the end of the year, but overall it's a really hot market for us, kind of midstream and at the refinery level. And we are starting to see some activity in kind of the non-traditional shale plays as well.
FCX is recognized as an active strategic acquirer and was one of the first that we saw increase activity as we came out of the recession. How would you describe the M&A market today in distribution?
It's very active, at least from our perspective, and what I found is we have made expansions into some adjacent product lines, such as pumps. We've opened up a whole new avenue of acquisition opportunities, and I still think owners of distribution businesses, mid-size and small distribution businesses, are close enough to 2009 that they remember the pain of the downturn and are certainly faced with increasing investment requirements both from vendors and customers, that they're looking for acquisition partners as a way to help them grow their business.
Would you say that's one of the key drivers of M&A activity in distribution right now, or what else is driving it?
I think that's certainly the key that we're finding in our discussions with distribution owners across our footprint. I would say our acquisition pipeline today is probably as robust as it's been in the past 10 years.
Okay. So what are some of the things that FCX looks for in companies that it may want to acquire?
It's really very simple. We want strong management teams that want to stay with us going forward post-acquisition, companies that have leading product lines and serve growing markets.
Great.
We've been fortunate really in all of our acquisitions where either the owner or the key driver of that business has remained with us since the acquisition.
Fantastic. So that's just a really key element, is keeping that management consistency?
It is. I think it serves to, there's always a lot of fear and disruption, in the acquired business and their employee base, and I think having that continuity and a track record of delivering to management teams and to acquired employees is certainly a big factor in our being successful.
So this last question is one that we ask of everyone we feature in this segment, and that's, what keeps you awake at night? In other words, what 3 things do you think managers and executives should be keeping front of mind right now?
I think it's key right now. We're seeing as the overall industrial economy starts to pick up, labor markets have gotten tighter. I know it's taking us longer to fill positions, and we're very actively adding new employees. We've benefited from the addition of a full-time recruiter on our staff to help us attract and retain that talent. But certainly it's getting tighter, and that makes it more challenging and certainly causes us to think very prominently about the retention as well as the attraction of good employees. And some of the things that we've been able to do because of our scale is, in addition to the full-time recruiter that we have on our staff, we have developed what we call FCX University, which is an internal training program that allows us to provide training resources, whether it's general selling skills, application, or product expertise training to our sales staff. And we've also, over the past 2 years, we've developed what we call the SALT program, or Sales and Leadership Training Program. And it's a management training program, and we're going to industrial distribution universities such as Texas A&M, East Carolina, Nebraska Kearney, where we're hiring out of school students who have majored in industrial distribution. So they've got a bent and a understanding of what we do and have chosen that as a career. And the combination of this training program, our recruiting resources, as well as a training program, allows us to bring these people on board and get them up to speed much more quickly than we ever could have done in the past.
That sounds like a great resource. How long have you been partnering with the universities to do that kind of stuff?
We're into our 2nd year, and so I think in total we have 8 sales and leadership training candidates on our staff currently, and we will probably have, I think by the time we end up with the spring recruiting season, 6 additional people joining us in the May-June timeframe.
Great. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for this month's executive briefing. We hope you enjoyed the insights that our speakers provided. If you'd like to access archives of our programs, visit mdm.com/executive briefing. If you'd like to contribute to this program or be featured in it, please email me at lindsay@mdm.com. Thank you.